So I'm going to show you how to learn about Auto Fence Builder and the best way to explore it. I'm not going to show you every option here because it would take a really long time. I'm just going to kind of give you some pointers onto getting started and show you the best approach. So in Unity, first of all, I'm sorry that my screen the fonts might be really small. The reason being is you'll see when I load Auto Fence Builder, which I'm going to do right now, the inspector panel is like, there's a lot of stuff over here. And if I use my regular monitor that I use for recording, it's just, I can't fit it all in and it's really hard. So first of all, let me first start by saying when you explore, find a spot in your scene where you've got a flat area, which I have here, and then like a hill. Because a lot of the options require you to be on a slope or this transition area here, so you can see what those changes are. So first of all, you've installed Auto Fence Builder, so I have it highlighted here, and then here's the inspector panel for it. And in here, let's start at the top and I'll explain a couple things. Well, let's just actually put a fence in here because that's the best way to kind of get started and how to explore. You can see when you have Auto Fence Builder selected, it gives you this little thing. I don't have a fence, empty fence, shift click to start building. So I can come over here, I can shift, click, and you can see that I'm starting to build, okay? And if I go up the hill, you can see that it goes up the hill as well. Um, and so as I do that, a couple things. I can come over here and first of all, I can clear all. If I hit that twice, it'll remove everything and then I can start again. And you can see if I click here and I click all the way up here, I get a similar looking fence, right? It's similar looking, but in functionality, it's a little bit different. First of all, this is perfectly straight because I only did 2 points, so it's going to go between those 2 points. So let me clear that. Actually, let me show you something else first. If I turn on show control, you can see that every place I clicked has that white dot, so that's the control. And now I can come up here and I can manipulate and I can drag this around. But as you can see, it stays straight, but it does conform to my terrain. As opposed to, let me clear this, hold down shift, click, 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 and then I can go zigzag as opposed to this. And now I can grab all these points, right, and then move them around, right? So you get the idea of the difference between the two. So let me clear that again, and let me just go click, click up here. And now you can see I also have these other things. I can control shift to add a point. All right, so add a point here, add a point there, which essentially adds those points, and now I can manipulate those just like I did if I had clicked at several points. And then I can also delete points. You can see control shift, you get the idea. You can use these to manipulate your points and then turn these on and off depending if you want to see your wall as you're working on it. So let's leave these off for now because I'm going to go down to this next section, which is this presets. Auto Fence Builder has a shitload of presets, like, I don't know, well over 100. And you can browse through these. If you just select one, it changes it to whatever you have. I also just kind of like to cycle through them. All right, so if I've got something in mind, that's pretty cool. It's a pipeline. If you got something in mind, you can do is you can cycle through these, get an idea for all the shapes and textures, and then if something's close, you can begin to work on it. But for the sake of what we're doing, I'm going to go these all new variation. These guys tend to be pretty random. Like that's a pretty random one. I'm gonna find something that's like really crazy and unorthodox and probably like that one is, but that's single rail. This one, check this out. So I don't know why would anyone would use this, but it's gonna be a good fence to start learning on. And let me explain a couple things. And this is the best way to learn Auto Fence Builder is to find one of these fences. And you can see when I go through these, when I click again, that the things change down here, okay? And that's because every new fence you load, all these options change for it, and that's the best way is to turn these on, turn them off, and see how these change from fence to fence, okay? So let's do this one, and let's go down. So I talked about these presets, and we can go to this section here, which is just, let's change this interposed distance. So what does that do? Well, it changes like your posts, your vertical posts here, it changes the distance between those posts. So if I created a fence, let me clear this again. And from here to here, my interpost distance is 3.8 meters. So I can make this longer and longer and longer until actually my post, it says 25. So this is 25 meters between there. So it's really stretching that out. But if I get rid of this altogether, it just makes it one big long one. Okay. So that's, that's the kind of thing, as I'm saying, is experiment and figure out what this stuff is. So I'm going to reset this. Let me see, I can put this back. That didn't reset that. Let's change this back to, I think it was 3 before. And you can also do things like keep grounded. So you see what happens when I don't keep it grounded. It just pops up and goes straight. Smooth does a little bit, but I think it's more if you have like a zigzag fence. I'm not going to show you all this stuff. I'm just going to show you, again, you got to explore these things. But down here, this is things that are in green are sections or things that are activated. So my posts are on. So you can see what happens when I click that. My posts turn off, right? Same thing, rail A, which tends to be this mortar. It's like brick. There's some concrete in there. So that's rail A. And then rail B is this barbed wire up here. Okay, I can turn that on and off. But you're looking at this, you're like, well, that's pretty random. Why is that so random? Well, let's talk about that. So first of all, we've got posts. This is how we turn them on and off. We talked about that. But this is how you control them. So we've got post controls, and which control obviously are posts. And again, just like above, these are the presets. So these are like more like macros, like fence types. These are specific elements in how we change them. So this is a concrete angled post that you see here. And I can start to, again, cycle through those. All right. Now I can also go down here and notice I got like these brick posts, concrete posts, all kinds of different posts. But you can cycle through and you can see those. And now you can also begin to play with them. You can do things like raise your posts and lower your posts, your post size, okay, X across your X, Y, and Z axis. You should know what those are. Main post size boost. I forget what that is. I think you can have main posts and you can have sub posts. I can't remember how that works. Let's see if this does anything when I change Y. Oh, main posts are the ends. Okay. So if I do that, it's the first post and the last post. So if you want, to end and begin, that's your main post. I can reset that. And then post size, this should change them all. Yep. So you can boost your main post size, your rotation. You can see what happened. I changed this too much. Reset, 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 reset. What happened to my posts? When I reset this to 1, it went down. Let me switch these back to whatever I had before. You can see post size. Let me raise that up a little bit. There we go. So again, you can always just do that, and you can always reset, right? That will bring everything back to maybe where it was before, but you get the idea. Post randomization, I can apply some random stuff to the main post, which are the ends. Variations, which are the ones in the middle. So let's say post height variation. Let me change this. Main and variations. There we go. That would change it to main variations. Main only. So you can see you can do different things here. And these are like random rotations and all kinds of different stuff, right? So same thing, rail controls are slightly different because rails are the areas in between. Again, I can cycle through the different types of rails in between. You're like, well, that's not changing all of them. I'll explain that in a second. But just be aware that rails are the sections between the posts. I can change the number of stacks. So if this is one rail, now if this was like a board, a single board, you'd see better, but you can see if I change this to 2, now I've got 2, and if I spread that out, you can see now I'm using 2. So 1 and 1 above it, and it looks really funky, but you get the idea. So if you want to do like a fence that has like rails, like a cattle fence, you could use something like that. So let me change this back to 1. And then lock Y grounded means that the rail will be on the ground. If you remove that, you can lift it up, for example. Okay. And the same thing, all this stuff is just offset like left and right, you know, X, Y, Z. Let me reset this to 0, lock it to the ground again. There's rotation, certain ways. Again, play with it. Now, same thing, I got my main. I can change the height variation for the front and back one, and the rotation, which comes in handy for the starts and finishes. So you get the idea. So here are my variations down here. Okay, and this is what when I say variations only, main variation, what those are. So this gets kind of hard to explain. So variations mean that we can vary the rail between the posts. And this is why I drew out, you can see I've got like 10, maybe 15 sections in here. And that's why I drew out this large section, is because we actually have what we call sequences. And this fence has 10 sequences. And if I choose a prefab type, that has 10, that has 10. Let me keep going here. These all have 10. These all have 10 sequences. It might change at some point. I might find a sense with a different sequence, but I'm just going to let this go for now. And I selected a different fence here, but it doesn't matter. But the sequences are, so this is sequence 1, this is sequence 2, this is sequence 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let me show you a different way of looking at this. So if I highlight sequence 1 here and disable it, see which 2? So this is my first sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is my 1, and I start the pattern over again. So if I turn that back on, it comes on. So now I've got 10 different sequences, and I can apply different rails to every sequence that I want. So this one has 10 different sequences. Sequence 1 is using the main, okay, prefab type for rails, which is this brick. This one that you have selected up here gets assigned to this first slot. Variation 1, which is selected here, gets assigned to this second slot. So if I change this first variation here, I selected something different, say brick, this panel here, you can see it changed it in this spot. So that means I can now select this for another sequence. So if I wanted to change 1 to this brick 2 panel, I highlight it, and now you can see that sequence 1 is now the brick 2 panel. And I can also manipulate sequence 1, its position, its size, and its rotation. And I can also do things like flip it from front to back, which is, you can see it a little bit here. So I essentially put like the flip it front and back. I can mirror it left and right, and that's hard to see. Let's go to sequence 2 so I can show you that. So sequence 2, we highlight it on and off so you can see it. Now I can mirror Z, so that flips it back and forth. I can flip it up and down as well. So you can see all those options. This is how I control every single sequence. So let me turn on 4. And I can assign up to 5 different prefabs into each sequence. Hopefully that makes sense. And of course I can disable them all. I can enable them all. That is though just the rail A. Now I go to rail B, okay, I got the same thing here, okay, rail B controls, but this one, here we go, this one only has 3 sequences. So it's got 1, 2, and 3. 1 is not enabled, so that's why I don't see anything here. 2 is not enabled, I bet, but 3 is, so that's why I see the barbed wire in 3. So if I turn off 3, you'll see here that barbed wire now gets disabled. But I could assign something else. It's this metal cylinder slim to 1. Signed it, turn it on. It's probably hidden here. And oh, why? Oh, there it goes. It's probably hidden, so I have to come back here. Give you a good example of how this works. Go back here to rail controls. Go back to 1. Position, and let me see, is this, yeah, let me lower this. So now that I lowered this, you can start to see here in position 1 that rail, which is rail B, sequence 1, starts to show up. Let me turn that on off so you can see. So now you get the idea of you can create these crazy sequences and to get actually, so make your fence look extremely random, okay? So that should definitely get you started playing with all this stuff. Just click stuff. You can't, oh, and another thing you can do is if you create something you really like, you can save it. So let's say I did this and I like this fence for some reason. It's ugly, but whatever. I can change this preset name to that's my real name. You guys don't want to know that. Masta Blasta fence. And I can decide I'm going to put it in this category, I say urban category, and then I'm going to save it. So now you can see that it's my preset here. And if I go down to urban, I got Masta Blastus fence. And now I can use it over and over again throughout my course. Let's see here. Down underneath, something you should be aware of is this refresh and unload. If you were to build your course right now, all of these prefabs that are in here get loaded into your build project for some reason, and it becomes huge, like well over a gig, I think. So what you need to do is before you build, you can do unload unused assets right here, and it removes those, and then do your build. When you, at some point, Auto Fence Builder will put those back in. So just remember, if you're using Auto Fence Builder, come in here and do this unload unused assets before you build your course. Other thing we should talk about, which is when you're done, what do you do? So let's say I'm done with this fence, okay, and I'm ready to kind of commit and use it. So at that point, you do a finish and start new, and you can give it a name, and you can also tell where you want to put it. So you could come over here, you could create an empty, call this, I like to call it raw fences. And then I, of course, reset this to 0. Come back over here to Auto Fence Builder. Now I can take this empty and I can drag it in here. Where was that? Oops, I moved off that screen. So go back here to Auto Fence Builder, finish and start new. I can take my raw fences empty, put it in here. Okay, and now what it's doing is it's kind of like exporting this into a asset Auto Fence Builder file. If I come back in here, I'm going to hit F, I'm going to fly over to it. You can see now it's on my course, and I can start to build other fences now with Auto Fence Builder because this one has kind of been committed. However, it is still like an Auto Fence file. It's kind of like in Vegetation Studio Pro when you plant by rules. It's still using Auto Fence Builder to plant this. I'm not sure if this is going to show up in game. Probably not. So you have to create a merged mesh copy. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. But if you want to edit it, this is where I found this is a little bit buggy. So this is my fence that I just made under my raw fences. If I come over here to edit, it should load back into the Auto Fence editor so you can change it. Let's see what happens. That time it worked. Sometimes I've got problems where this won't reload or it gets all goofy. It's working for me right now. That's why before I really, it doesn't take long to rebuild a fence, so not a big deal. You can just delete it. So let me just Auto Fence Builder. Let me clear all. You can see it's gone now. Let me enable this. Go back in here. I'm just going to delete this fence too. So now I've got no fences, and it adds this pre-edit thing here. I don't like that either for some reason. I don't know why it does that. Let's go back into my Auto Fence Builder. Just build another quick fence here that I just did. Finish, start new, put it here, hit OK. And now it's going to show up again under this empty, and there it is. Now, what you should do is you create a merged mesh copy of this. And let me show you what happens when you do that. I can do merge mesh copy, and now it's going to look more familiar to you in this format, which is, I would say this is more like baking. You can see it created this other asset over here, and if I click on it, it doesn't look like anything happened. I'm actually double rendering my fence right now. Once as an auto fence rules based, okay? So let me turn that one off. So this is my raw fence. I'm gonna turn that off. You can see it's still there. Well, now it's this one, which is a mesh fence. Let me turn that on and off for you. Now, let's expand this, and I'm gonna show you what happens here. When I look at Rails merged 0, this should now look very familiar to you. This is my mesh renderer, okay? I could put a collider in here, a mesh collider. This is what I want to use when I export to my game. I've got my materials in here that I can manipulate as well. There's this other, this is my barbed wire, okay? And here are my posts. And I can turn these on and off. If I don't want my posts, I can just turn them off here. And I can also change the material or manipulate the material for my posts. Just like anything else, I can make it lighter or darker, I can turn them blue, wherever you want. So this should get you started. And then in the next video, I'm going to walk you through an example of a fence that I am building for Rock Creek.